5 o'clock. We're all ready. I'd like to call this meeting of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. A quorum of board members is present, and this meeting has been duly called and posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. Our first item on here is public comments. Ms. Connie, do we have any public comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, moving on to the next item is review and discuss superintendent search process. Thompson and Moses, go right ahead.
Very good. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, for giving us a few minutes this afternoon. And first of all, we want to say appreciation for the great individuals that you nominated to participate in the focus group discussions that we had beginning yesterday afternoon and running all day today. We had outstanding attendance. All but I think about half a dozen of the individuals that were nominated were able to make it for all the different groups. We had very lively discussions. I don't know if you've heard anything back from any of the individuals, but we thought they were very productive sessions. Mike and I took extensive notes. We'll give you just some of the highlights of what we heard today, and this is just kind of just touch a couple of themes that stood out to us, and then we will get everything typed up, organized, and we'll send it to you. And what we particularly will want to call to your attention in all the comments is to be looking for kind of thematic comments or issues that recurred over and over during the day, and those will be particularly helpful to you as you think about candidates and as you move into and through the search process. So, Mike, I'll mention a few and then invite you to add a few as we go through. First of all, anything y'all heard about any of it that you want to pass on to us?
I heard from one individual just thanking me for nominating her and saying that the process was very efficient and well run, and they were super impressed by both of you, and said you guys hit a home run by hiring this search firm.
We were there as your representative. So
thank you,
right.
because that speaks highly of you and reflection on us.
So,
I heard from somebody that said they actually had a lot of fun. So I don't know what was going on, but they really enjoyed it. So yeah.
Well, good. What we did, each session is an hour and a half long, and we sat around this table, and the groups were typically between about 14 and 18 people, and we had an hour and a half long guided conversation with a series of questions that we went through. We collected all the information. Everybody gets an opportunity to talk, but just as important, everybody gets an opportunity to listen to other people's points of view. And we think that's always useful as communities begin to go into this process.
Everybody got to talk at least 4 times.
At least 4 times.
Because,
Yep.
and it's not they raise their hand. We go around the table and it great. Engagement was great.
Yep,
Great
yep,
engagement.
very good. And particularly the students that were nominated, we always enjoy hearing from students, and you had some outstanding young people who had some good contributions to make. So our first question, kind of an icebreaker, what we told them is we are actively recruiting on behalf of the board. We give them an overview of the search process, explain that we're not going to be picking the superintendent, but our job is to help the board manage the process, recruit candidates, and put the board in a position to make the best possible decision. But we kind of start by saying we're the district's representatives. We're your salespeople. And we're actively recruiting, and so what are some of the strengths of Belton ISD what's the elevator speech? What would you want somebody who's thinking about applying for this position to know? Why are you proud to be here? What would you want someone else to know? We always think that's a good positive way to kind of focus and open up a conversation and get people engaged. And I'll give you just a flavor of some of the comments. People overwhelmingly talked about the strength of the education team, both the teachers and the administrators in the district. Had great multiple comments about teachers care for kids. It's not just a job. A lot of a lot of comments about the strength of your educational team that I think you would be very proud about. Partnerships with the cities and other entities in the area were mentioned as real strengths, that there's a lot of community collaboration between the district and other entities. Central Texas location, proximity to Austin, proximity to Waco, proximity to Hill Country, just kind of the crossroads of Texas. I think that's the way one person put it, Mike, that it's a desirable area to be in. Small town feel. It feels like that ideal small hometown, people know each other, look out for each other, expect to see each other at the store or wherever, and that was mentioned over and over. One that I will mention, and then Mike asked you to, is that both teachers and administrators are pushed and expected to continue to grow professionally. That it's a district that is progressive in that regard, and there's that commitment to ongoing professional development. So Mike, you want to mention a couple?
Sure. And most of this is not gonna surprise you because these are people you know and in your community, and you're in touch with them and they're in touch with you. But, you know, I like the one person said, we've got sophistication with small town flavor, and I thought that was
Yep.
pretty good, and a lot of people were, voiced that. But they talked about, healthcare, higher education, and just as David said, just the location here is just a great location between Waco and Austin and all that affords. The military community, of course, was mentioned as a strength as well. And then, one that I liked, of course, is they said, this is a family-oriented community. We emphasize families here, and, so you know, there was a chance for everybody to tell us, you know, the things that they thought we ought to present to prospective candidates, and, it was good to hear, you know, they're just, the pride and loyalty to the community was very strong. It was all good.
All right, so that was a good icebreaker, got everybody engaged, got off to a positive conversation. Mike, you want to do the next one?
You go ahead and run with it,
All right.
what you heard. I'll-
So we
I'll
didn't
supplement
turn it
what
around.
your I have lots of, I don't know how many pages of lists I have.
I've got 22 pages of notes, so.
I'm close, you go ahead.
So then we turned around and we say, okay, we could probably spend more time talking about the strengths and the positives, but we're gonna move on. The next question is, what are the challenges? And the way we frame it is we say, we never use the word problem. These are challenges. We all have them. And we said, think about it this way. If somebody, Mike and I always talk about this, it's kind of like marrying into a family. There are family stories, there are family issues, and there are ongoing family things that you don't really know about unless you're in the family. And so we said, if somebody's thinking about coming here from outside and thinking about applying for this job, what are some of the ongoing challenges that they ought to be aware of? What are the things that they ought to kind of prepare to roll up their sleeves and be prepared to work on? And it's kind of the flip side of the first one, and some of the ones we mentioned, and this again won't surprise you, growth was overwhelmingly mentioned as a challenge, and it's also mentioned as a strength. And Mike and I made the comment that we have worked with districts that are losing population,
Closing schools, laying off teachers.
and you know, there are stresses. It's probably better to have your issues than those issues. So, but the challenge of growth, of managing growth, not just the logistics of growth, and there was conversation about what that means in terms of boundaries. We had a lot of detailed conversation about restructuring boundaries, cross-district equity between campuses, a lot of conversation about ensuring that there was equity in program of facilities across the district. That even as you're growing in some areas, you have older schools and other areas of town that still need attention. But just the growth, and then one thing that people were very sensitive to is as we grow, how do we not lose that hometown feel that we're so proud of, and that we feel like gives us that Belton identity. So, that was probably a top challenge. A second challenge to that it's a good thing that your community is very aware of it, is that everybody knows that going from a one high school community to a two high school community, the opening of the new high school is something that's exciting, it's positive, but it will also change Belton ISD. And that was identified as a challenge. We did hear a lot of positive comments that the district has planned and prepared for it, but still getting through that in a productive way was identified as a top challenge. Student-teacher ratios, again, this is kind of an outside of growth. But then the one I'll come back to was just equity across the district. We probably heard that, Mike, in every single group multiple times. Just ensuring that.
Some call it parity,
Yeah,
some call it
different
parity, some
words,
call it
but-
equity.
Yeah. But those are growth, the Malta High School environment, and then that parity, making sure that all campuses and kids feel like they're being treated on an equitable and appropriate way. Anything you want to add to that?
You know, and I think the big ones there was discussion about the achievement gap and about the need for the district to stay focused on the achievement gap, and that the core business of this school district is teaching and learning, and they wanted to, they thought that was something that everybody needed to keep in their mind, but the achievement gap was seen as a challenge. Several comments as the district got larger, they were concerned about consistency.
Yep.
And I pushed back just a little on, well, do you think it's a policy it's a policy-driven district? Because I think as you get larger, you have to really have a good set of policies, you have to really insist that the policies be followed, and you as the governing board, that's your bread and butter is policy. But a little bit of feeling that as we've moved from a smaller district to a larger district, that maybe we've been a little bit loose on that, and I couldn't judge it, but I would just say that comment was heard. And then the other one that you will probably might, and this came as much from the students, and it came from a couple of the adults, a parent or two and a teacher, but it came from the students as much, and that was with regard to student discipline. And kids taking advantage of teachers and kids, having relationships with, as they call them, APs, that seem to allow them to be
Get away with
things. And these were kids saying, these were good kids, and they weren't no axe to grind. They were just commenting, hey, we think our teachers need to, be supported, and I know you do too, and we all do. So but when the kids are making that observation, then that's, they're noticing something. But all done, I would say, even the challenges, all made in a constructive way. Nobody was mad, nobody was angry, nobody was hostile. Nobody was, it was all set in a spirit of improvement, in a spirit of, this is about, how can we, as a new superintendent, need to know what the challenge is gonna be and what do they need to work on. So, just let's say, good attitude, good spirit about it.
So the third guided question, and we divided it up every time. One time we'd go around this way, next time we'd go this way, and then we'd split and go this, so that the same person wasn't always at the end of the line with, with everything kind of covered by the time hopefully that worked well. Then we moved on to, we kind of do use those first two as sort of a needs assessment, And again, hopefully that'll be useful information to the board, but then we start talking about what are you looking for in the actual candidate? If the board's kind of, going through a process of developing some priorities, I don't want to say a profile in a formal sense, but certainly your priorities of what to look at. The next question focused on professional characteristics. What basis should someone have touched in a career, professional characteristics, and we differentiated that from kind of personal attributes or characteristics, and we covered that in a second question. In terms of professional characteristics, we heard consistently experience with growth. Somebody, and then even beyond that, we heard many people say experience with multi-high school environments. And we did emphasize to all groups, by the way, that the posting is open. It's open for people inside the district as well as outside the district. But I would relate to the board that experience with multi-high school districts was an important consideration that I think we heard more and more during the course of the day. A doctorate, probably, Mike, a majority of the people who spoke to that said it was preferred but not a deal breaker. I think there were some people who would move a little bit further towards if it's not absolutely required, it's darn close to being required, but there was a recognition this is a community in an area that values education and values that ongoing professional growth. But it is someone who knows where Belton is not just now, but where you're going. That experience with a multi-high school setting, and even to the extent of prior superintendent experience, was an important consideration that we heard multiple times. We didn't hear a single person say that they were in favor of a non-educator.
We asked the question.
We did ask the question about are you open to people, you know, who from outside, and we heard very strongly, if you're gonna lead teachers and educators, you need to know what teachers and educators are doing, and that familiarity with the classroom. But there was also a recognition that skills beyond that, some ability to understand HR, to understand finance, to understand some of the other aspects of operation of a big district and a growing district were important. Mike, do you have any you want to mention?
There's not much to add. It was pretty overwhelming. And some people were pretty articulate, as David said, about supervising people and having walked in their footsteps, and then having, and a couple of people who are not educators, who are parents or business people, said they need to have been a teacher, they need to have been a principal, they need to run a campus, they need to know what that's like, and they need to have perform some other responsibilities. We talked to them about the career path of someone that might be a sitting superintendent, but the job before they had this one, they were maybe an assistant or a deputy in a district of 20 or 30,000 kids with multiple high schools. We told them that we like to look back at not just the job you have now, but what did you have back the previous job and the previous job before that. In other words, what's been your path and what experiences and what bases have you touched? And that we had a good discussion with the group about that kind of thing, about they as far as professional, they definitely said we don't want a job jumper. We want someone that will hopefully come and stay. And then of course,
No stepping stones.
No stepping
That was a
stones.
phrase that was used multiple times. Yeah.
we asked us how long will people stay, and we said, well, the number one thing, the correlation to how long people stay in the superintendency is how long is the stability of the board and how long the board stays. The longer the board stays, the longer the superintendent usually stays, and the more stable the board, the more stable the superintendent, the more stable the
Right.
district.
Even when there's change on boards, if it's within a stable leadership structure, that translates into stable administrator.
Yeah, if it's ever 3 or 4 years, and not every year, every 2 years, but in any event, stability, they was definitely a desire. And I did make this comment, I said, the good thing about Belton is this: a lot of superintendents find that if they want to get more responsibility, hence additional compensation, they have to go to a bigger district. Well, here's a district that's gonna get bigger. If you come and you stay, your district's gonna grow and you can grow with it, which is a nice position to be in. In any event, we had those discussions. I think that there were several people that said, you know, we think the finance piece is important, we think the human resources piece is important, understanding systems is important, but this school district is about teaching and learning. We really want somebody that keeps us focused on our academic performance, on what we're doing for kids. So I think that's probably in addition to what as David said, we gave them a chance to talk about, we talk about texting, non-texting too?
We did, and not strong feelings there. I want to go back to challenge, one that was mentioned, I had a note by it, and I forgot to mention it. Several people observed during the day that Belton ISD serves more than just the city of Belton, that it serves a portion of the city of Temple, and that the school district is a unifying entity for a larger area than just city of Belton. And so coordinating with those other entities that are also served by this school district was recognized as something that's important, and it's important to do it well. So our next question, having spent quite a bit of time talking about professional characteristics, and I think we gave you a flavor of the main ones we heard there, was what are the personal attributes, what are the personal characteristics that are kind of the non-negotiables that individuals want to see in the new superintendent. And we got, this is a very aspirational list, as you might very well imagine.
Walks on the water.
Well, I'll tell y'all, I told the group this, but, I'll tell the board, you know, years ago when, Mike got the job in the late '80s as superintendent of Lubbock.
I was 6 years
Yeah,
old.
yeah, I knew many of the board members in Lubbock, and, this is pre-internet, so you didn't sit up at midnight in your pajamas and Google and find out everything about everything. But the board president at the time told me, he said, you know, right after Mike got there, at some point, Mike got to see the list of attributes that they wanted, desired, expected in a new superintendent. And Mike said, well, now that I've seen the list, I think we have a problem. And the superintendent and the board president went, oh gosh, what did we miss as we went through this? And Mike said, well, according to this list, you intended to hire Jesus, and you got stuck with Moses. Both literally. So, you know, so we made the point in all of the conversations that it is right, and your community very much deserves to have very high expectations and aspirations, but to remember you are hiring a mortal. And these are not Lone Ranger jobs, that the ultimate strength and success is in the ability to build and sustain and work with and through teams. So we had good conversations and a little levity in the course of the day. Some of the personal characteristics that were mentioned, and I'll flag just a couple and then Mike may want to mention some others. Someone who is a good listener, who who has their own opinions, but who is willing to listen to and take and genuinely accept information from others. Someone who is approachable, who is not, that people are comfortable talking with and to. Someone who is visible in the community, not someone who sits in their office, but someone who leads from the front and is visible and out in the community. Someone who understands the history and identity of Belton and Belton ISD and accepts it and values it. And finds that tough boundary between kind of preserving and protecting what you know and what you value, but also knowing how to implement change over time as needed and also as the community grows. But as someone who will give that kind of respect and acceptance, someone who is truly committed and will be involved in the larger community and larger activities in the district. Someone who is a team builder and someone who loves kids. We don't want to ever forget that. As Mike said, this is ultimately about educating children. Mike, do you want to mention a few?
Character, integrity, courageous leadership. I thought those were all really, people offered those again in thoughtful ways about they're gonna be tough decisions to be made. And, but what I guess I liked a couple of things that people said that we want somebody that loves this work, but is balanced intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically, family-wise. In other words, that they've got balance in their life, because they don't, they won't be able to do well. I thought the people, a good number of your appointees understood that. They saw this as a pretty demanding job, and it needed to be held by someone who has that balance and can operate. The other thing that I liked is a couple of people, as they went around and talked, they'd start off and say, we need somebody that's really understands business and finance. And they'd go around talking, and then they'd say, well, we need somebody that's kind of understands kids and teachers and what they're up to. And then say, no, we need somebody that knows how to hire the right kind of people, and that can hire, and that knows how to identify talent and help. They're in the talent acquisition business of bringing the best talent for our kids to this district, whether they be a teacher, whether they be a principal or a central office person or whatever. And then finally, one of the individuals said, I hope you're looking at how good a job someone does at what is their legacy of developing other leaders. Because they wanted to know, when you look at people, do you look at people and see if they have helped other people develop professionally and develop other leaders? And I thought that's pretty wise. That there was some wisdom in the group that understood that, this is about helping people grow, helping kids grow, helping teachers grow, helping administrators grow and develop. And they got to that pretty quick. So, but
good conversations, and frankly, the great thing about the diverse groups is the teachers didn't just talk to the teachers. The teachers got to have their conversation, but they got to hear from the parents, and they got to hear from the business community, and they all
the faith-based groups.
and faith-based,
And kids.
And you could actually see people's thinking, the nuances kind of evolving a little bit during the course of each conversation as they kind of heard a different little point of view. And people would echo that, and they would say, well, now that I've heard what so-and-so has to say, I think I agree with that. And so hopefully that will be productive in that regard. So,
if y'all recall, that's the reason we said we wanted it mixed up. And Connie, thank you for that. Appreciate y'all. And Madam President, thank you, everybody that did that. That was a good mix of people, and it got exactly the kind of conversation, dialogue. And I hope that's what you hear back from people, that they thought, you know, hey, I got to learn something as well as offer something, I got to learn something as well. So anyway, but Connie and Elizabeth both did a great job today too. Very
Very much
helpful.
appreciated.
Got us in and out in the barbecue. I participated in a sampling barbecue
Yeah.
today at lunch with them.
We had a good meeting with your media at lunch and certainly enjoyed that. So that, again, that's a flavor of what we heard during the day. Those are.
You're gonna get a report.
You'll get it all in writing. And hopefully it'll be useful to you. We did tell everyone that the survey with the questions goes up live on the website tomorrow. It'll be up for a week, so others will have an opportunity to weigh in and give their comments, and those will also be compiled and considered, so.
A question on that
Sure,
real quick?
sure.
I'm not sure if there's anyone in this room that can answer it, or if we need to ask somebody else, but will parents and staff be actually sent a link to fill out the survey? Or will they be maybe reminded in an email to go look at it, or?
We are happy to do all of the above.
I
And
think
it'll
it
also
would
be
be useful
tweeted and
because-
Facebooked, and it will be in all of our usual channels, yes.
Right, I just feel like they're gonna need a link sent to them, otherwise you're gonna have very low participation.
Okay, so we'll defer to
Absolutely. It'll go out in all of
your
our.
staff on that.
Thanks.
We talked about the timeline, talked about applications, we're receiving good interest, good conversations. We've already received, I think, 15
Yeah, we're
completed
between 15 and 20 and
applications. And and frankly, that's high for this early, this far out from the deadline. We typically will get more as we get closer to the deadline.
just think about it for a minute. If you're a candidate, you're thinking about being a candidate, you want to be in, and you have a really good job, you want to be in early or late. You know, the real contenders will be in the last 2 or 3 or 4 days. We were already talking to people and said, I'm gonna submit materials, but I'm not gonna submit it to you
Closer to the
until,
deadline.
because there's an exposure factor. Even though they trust that David and I won't say anything, that you won't say anything, there's an exposure factor. They think the longer that's out there. And so now, if they are someone who's not a sitting superintendent, and they don't really have a, you know, that they don't feel that's professionally not damaging to them, then they'll gladly go ahead and send the credentials. But those who, particularly the sitting superintendents in good positions, are going to be, and we've had very good conversations with some good people. I think you're gonna see a nice pool. I think you're gonna have some hard decisions to make. And then David and I are gonna say yes. Because
That's good.
if y'all tell us later on that this was hard and this was difficult, we're gonna say good. That means you had some good people to think about. But right now is not a real strong, and we do have good interest, and we've already got applications on file, but today is not the day and the truth of it is, we get to be about 5 or 6 days out. If there's some people that have told us they're gonna be in and they're not in, we're gonna call them, and they're gonna, but it's just the way it happens. It's an exposure deal to them. It's nothing more than that. It's not anything to worry about, and if we get worried about it, you shouldn't worry about it. David and I'll be the ones to worry about it when we think it's time to say something.
And remind us of the deadline for that.
December the 2nd.
December the 2nd, close of business on December 2nd, so.
It will have been open over 60 days.
Yep.
And, but I want to tell you we are getting a lot, it's almost every day there's a call or a note about it, almost every day. Usually sometimes too, we get an email, a text, a phone call about Belton. And it's, you know, what do I need to do, tell me about it. And you've already, whether you know it or not, I think you've already had about 6 or 7 candidates have already driven into your district, brought their spouse, and a couple more spent the night here looking around and
That's awesome.
already gone down,
Yeah.
have already gone down to the gym and eaten. And, no,
Mike, did you ever go any place that Debbie didn't tell you was okay?
no, Debbie would say, you think about that job? We're going to take the boys, our parents, let's go, we're going over there and look around. And, I want to see the houses, I want to see the churches, I want to see the schools, I want to see, I said, don't you trust me? No, She said, I trust you.
But no.
But no, but this goes back, family is important, it's a team game, and the good ones are gonna do, just like we're gonna vet them, and you're gonna do your due diligence on them when it's time, they're gonna do the good ones are gonna do the same thing. They're not recklessly gonna move just say, I wanna move my family and go somewhere else without thoroughly looking at it, but you've already had some visitors in your district that quietly come in and looked around. So anyway, and I think I'd be surprised if you hadn't already had a couple of calls that have been made on behalf of candidates to principals and athletic directors about the job.
People are watching video of board meetings, you know, that's what's going on.
And that's, but but again, everybody should do their homework.
Yeah.
And, you're gonna do yours, you're doing yours, we're doing it, and they're gonna do their homework, and that's what should happen. I think, I know y'all have another meeting here in about 25 minutes or so, but I think we ought to let y'all tell us if there's any questions you have, we'd like to hear them, but if there's anything you wanna tell us that we need to be especially mindful of, or that is really of interest to you that you didn't hear, and I didn't think you'd hear a lot of surprises, because you know, this is your community, these are people you know, you appointed, and they're gonna reflect a lot of what you know and what you believe. So I doubt there were many surprises, but if there's something you didn't hear, or you think, hey, we really want you to be mindful of this as you're talking to people, or as we're thinking about people.
I'm a little curious, with our teachers that came in,
Mhm.
was there anything different they said than like perhaps other members of the community said? Were their comments any different or more specialized?
You know, first thing, I don't ever remember, I never heard a teacher say a single word about feeling underpaid, underappreciated. The only thing I would say is that the concern was class size. That was,
A couple people commented about testing and how much time gets consumed. And, you know, that's not entirely within your control. I mean, some of that's driven by state and federal decision makers. There was, you know, some people acknowledged that it took time away from just instruction, so.
and there is an understanding that y'all are kind of up against the tax cap on your facilities too, and you're having to let your property values grow so you can create some space in the tax rate to either get some additional funds under the INS, dedicated to INS, or dedicated that you can do something with. There's an understanding of it. But, you know, I would say the discipline issue, and it was mentioned maybe once or twice by teachers, probably as much by the kids as by the teachers. And then I would say the secondary teachers just, and again, not whining, just a concern that class sizes are larger than they wish
Mike,
they
one thing I did hear from two teachers that I think is worth passing on is a recognition that when you open the new facilities, you don't bleed all of your strongest folks off of some of your existing campuses, and that you have kids, and in many cases you have kids from low-income backgrounds who need great teachers and deserve those strong staffs, and that was part of that overall equity conversation. But we did hear a couple
True.
teachers say, don't just come raid and take everybody who is kind of the quote strongest teacher over to the nice shiny new campus. So I think that's something for the board to have in your mind and just be aware of.
Janet, good question, but not, you know, again, I think people feel like they're working at a pretty good place,
Yeah.
a pretty good district.
Everybody was happy to be
Starting
here.
salaries
Yep.
have been, y'all are on par with, evidently with Colleen and Temple, you're very competitive. You know, again, nobody's whining. Certainly they would offer how they thought things could be improved, but, you know, in a constructive way, you know, so.
Did anybody talk any about special programs like
We did.
special ed or
We did.
CTE
Yep.
or AP, whatever?
Yes.
Did. We had several comments about, and a couple of positive comments about the special needs programs.
Parents said they were here because of
Yeah,
special
one,
needs
one
programs.
person said that actually was a big part of their reason for being here. Several very good comments about the career technology programs. You know, one comment that's worth passing on, you'll see it in writing. One person observed that they felt like there were programs for the highest achieving band of students, and there were a lot of resources and a lot of supports for the neediest, but that you kind of have a group in the middle that sometimes feels like they get lost a little bit.
And that comment got dittoed by.
Right, once it was made, a couple others kind of weighed in.
It got dittoed by some others.
Yeah.
And there were people say, we want to be sure that the special needs programs, that the superintendent is responsive to those. It came under the challenges category, I think, when we were talking about challenges. It was that the superintendent is probably not going to have special education certification, but we'd like, hopefully, that somebody that's very sensitive to
And
those.
his experience.
And has experience working with those programs and an appreciation for them. But equal, the CTE programs were also equally important to a lot of people too.
And I think this was one, maybe two groups we had a conversation about. You know, sports are always, this is Texas, sports are important. But don't lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of other co-curricular and extracurricular activities that a lot of kids are involved in, fine arts, et cetera, and that those programs also deserve kind of recognition and support. We talked about how participation in those programs are frankly some of your best dropout prevention programs. Kids do well, do better academically, but don't get into the discipline issues, and how just having strong extracurricular, co-curricular programs, not just in the athletics, but in other areas, is something that people value.
Just a quick anecdote on that. When I was in Austin, in front of the legislature one day, I was in front of the appropriation committee, they wanted to know why we didn't require districts to cut their spending on extracurricular activities. So we did a survey, and did a big research study on kids that were in UIL, music, one-act play, band, choir, athletics, one-act play, speech, and calculating devices, and that 96% of the kids that were in those programs graduated from high school. If they were in one of those programs, and so I asked the legislature, so you want me to cut our best dropout prevention programs? Or you want us to encourage kids to be involved? Because the more involved they have a reason to go to school, to graduate, stay in school. So anyway, but this.
And Mike, you may remember a number of years ago, one of the school finance lawsuits, the commissioner at the time was Dr. Shirley Neely, who is a dear friend and actually was one of my clients. She was a superintendent before becoming commissioner, and I think was very understanding of kind of some of the arguments that they were making. But the state had made an argument in trial that, you know, the districts weren't spending all the money that they were spending because they had to, but because they chose to. And they talked particularly about all the curricular and extracurricular activities, and so Shirley was testifying, and so on cross-examination, I just kind of walked through her experience and said, you know, is it your experience that kids who participate in all of these programs tend to do better academically, that they don't drop out, that they tend to have fewer discipline problems? And Shirley, absolutely, that's right. And I said, and is it your experience that the greatest growth we're having in participation in many of these programs is among girls and minorities? And she said, absolutely, that is my experience. And I said, so is it the position of the state of Texas that we need to cut this out? And she said, 100% no. And she said, I don't care what they said over there, my answer is no. And so I said, thank you very much. And we moved on. So those are important programs. Those are, you know, many of us 20 years after high school or more, we may not remember a particular class that we were in, but we will remember the activities that we're in, and that's,
Well, everybody in your group,
Yeah.
your focus group people had a good perspective.
we had good conversations and some
They
good,
had a good perspective.
history about that. So-
What else, what other questions, or what else would you want us to know that needs to, that you didn't hear, that you think, did you kind of hear what you thought you'd hear, or do you need, is there something else you want us to be thinking about that is, that you're, as we recruit, as we talk to candidates or anything, that you say, boy, that, here's a non-negotiable for me that I didn't hear.
Well, nothing comes to mind for me personally, but I'd be eager to see the final report, which you all
And
send that, so
I'm
we
back
can
in the
kind of.
office tomorrow, and we'll get busy getting it cleaned up, getting it all typed up and organized.
Did y'all see me hand David my notes?
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so we'll,
You know,
what
witnesses.
what we tell people is, we're gonna write diligently, and between the two of us, we do a pretty good job of capturing everything that is said during the course of the discussion. So we'll turn this around and get it back to you.
We certainly appreciate all the work you did
Yeah.
today and last night, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just really gonna do I appreciate the board speech, because I do wanna talk with my fellow board members, and I'm gonna come back over here in a second.
Okay.
Board, I just want you all to know how much I appreciate each one of you. I appreciate the fact that through all the things that we've been through in these last few months, we've been able to stay focused. We've been able to come together, and we were able to make the decision to hire this lovely firm here.
Thank
Because
you.
it was very scary, you know, when you lose your
Sure, of course it
superintendent.
is.
We all went through the gamut of emotions. None of us knew exactly where we were gonna land, but with you guys at the helm and helping us get there, we know that the ship is sailing straight. We're gonna get exactly where we need to be. And we appreciate
Thank
the
you.
fact that you all facilitated those focus group meetings, got all those great conversations started, and we can hardly wait to get to the end to see what great person we have.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Probably have a homework assignment. Connie's gonna send you something around that you may wanna look at, that, some data and some information that I think you may wanna find.
Just start being aware of.
It's public information, so, it's on the TEA website, but it's salary information that you may wanna take a look at, just so you're, familiar with that, in districts in your peer group, you know, about your size, so you can know that.
It's about 10,000 to about 18,000, just kind of so what you can see what.
We come back on the 17th, I think we start at 5 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it'll be as we said, it'll be a 3 or 4 hour meeting.
That's in December.
It's in December 17th, Tuesday night, y'all have a meeting on the 16th, I believe.
We do.
And we'll be back, so, I hope y'all are not too tired, but we'll get started, we'll try to make it go as smoothly and efficiently as possible, but it's just a meeting that you're gonna wanna look at some things, and it's gonna take some time. It doesn't have to be terribly tedious, but it'll be of interest to you. This will be a very interesting meeting, and as you look at, candidates and their information. We will also have, questions, and we'll go through the interview steps and protocols, and so you'll be prepared when you come back after the holidays. You'll be prepared for we already have the dates on our calendar that you're gonna interview. I think the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after you come back, and we've already got the times and everything established, which we appreciate, but we'll still go through kind of the steps and what that needs to, kind of how that needs to work, and we'll have as I say, we'll have questions for you, and we'll go through and kind of set up the interview format, so it'll go smoothly, and you'll feel comfortable and good about that, and prepared for that. But
We've got those dates outlined for January for
Right.
the interview piece.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Or make sure that that's on your calendars, and make sure you all try to be here, so
Yeah,
that
that's-
will make that go.
I think you're gonna find that's gonna be key. That's gonna be as you know, this is the most important decision you're gonna make. You can mess up a lot of other things, but if this one gets messed up, it's hard to fix the others. If you get this one right, then a lot of other things can go wrong, but if this is right, then then they can be okay. But this is one, I think, where I hope, the 7 of you can have got those dates and can all participate. I think you'll find it not only fun, but valuable, helpful, informative, and maybe, I think, in the end, you may find it very, very rewarding to all through the process. So, anyway, anything else for us tonight?
Yeah, I did one other thing. So when we did our team building, I don't know, it seems like 2 months ago at this point, right? So we generated the list, kind of the characteristics we were looking for. Did they have that list?
We've not seen that, but it would be helpful.
I mean, if somebody has
Okay.
that, could send that
If
to
somebody would
us.
send that to us,
Yeah, we'll
that would be, that'd
I
be.
mean, they overlap pretty well with
Yeah.
some of the things that you talked about, right?
But we would like to see that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I think they got something, but it was.
They've got it somewhere.
It's fine if it's available, if
Sure.
you just need, if you
We
guys.
spent a good 2 hours working on it, so.
We did, and it was
want
really
somebody to read
thoughtful.
Right.
Well, okay, well, then we'll pay attention.
There was some definite overlap with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Statements.
Yeah,
Was someone from, was it Tasby that?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Tasby,
Did that
David.
little workshop?
help you with it, yeah.
You didn't use the word vision, I don't know if you used that, but
We-
vision came to mind.
We did hear that in some of the comments today.
Vision
Somebody who-
casting and that kind of thing.
Somebody who'd chart a course and inspire others to.
You know, but I'll say this about visioning and mission. I tell superintendents that you don't get to decide the destination for the school district. The board decides the destination for the school district. You own the schools, it's your schools, your kids, your money. Now, you may want to take advice and counsel from the leader to say, this is what a good program looks like. But the board sets the destination, the superintendent becomes the pilot. Then the superintendent decides, well,
How to get
the
there.
wing flaps need to be at this, we need to go this fast, we've got to watch our fuel, how much fuel we're using and so forth. You're just saying, this is the destination, now get us there. Now, then we gotta let the superintendent fly the plane. You better not crash it, because if you do, then, you know, but that, and I used to tell my board, you know, that, look, you know, I love you and I care about you, I will never tell you how to vote. Don't tell me what to recommend. I'm gonna recommend what's best for the kids, what I think's best for the district, and you get to evaluate that recommendation, and you get to evaluate, and then you can vote it up or down, and when you're through, then we're friends, and I'm good, and I go to the next challenge, and we all do. But you have a role to govern this district, make policy, and set that destination, that vision, if you will, and then that superintendent has a job to be the pilot, to get you there, and do the things, the day-to-day things, the flap setting, the wings, the fuel, the speed, and all those kinds of things that they have to do to get you there. But I'll just say this, after you complete this process, David and I are not trying to do anything, but we want to make sure that you have success, and to the point, to the extent that we need to do something to help you afterwards, we're available to do that. But we're going to go ahead and get the right pilot identified first, and then after we get the pilot identified, then you can tell us if we've accomplished that mission, go from there, okay?
We posted an executive session just in case we had anything we need to talk about in closed session. I think we're good
We
unless
don't
there's
have
something.
anything, we're not
All
going
right.
to go into closed session.
We're good, y'all.
So, board, do you have any other questions, comments? Good. Then if that's the case, we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank y'all,
Good. Thank you.
appreciate it.